When I came to Children's Mercy and I began to put together my leadership team, I invested a lot of political capital by hiring a lot of leaders from the outside. Even though we had great leadership talent from within the organization, I had concluded that those folks had not yet been developed at a point where they could assume these executive roles. But as I hired a lot of people from the outside, I also made the commitment to myself and the organization that we were going to invest in developing people from within. Not just existing leaders, but people who didn't even realize that they had leadership potential. And that was the catalyst for the creation of the Berry Institute. So we created that as an entity and a pathway for existing leaders and potential leaders to come in, to go through an assessment process so that we understood what their goals and aspirations were, and to help them in a very personalized way at times, and in a broader sort of macro way at times, to get plugged into programs and modules and pathways that can help develop them in accordance with what their goals were.
Hi, Abraham here. Well, sort of. I lost my voice due to a very bad cold and I'm still recovering. So I'm using AI to fill in for this segment. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get back to the intro. Today's guest is someone who has spent more than 4 decades leading, shaping, and mentoring leaders across healthcare and beyond. Paul Kempinski is the founder and president of Kempinski Consulting, where he pays forward his 42 years of leadership experience through executive coaching, governance advisory, and speaking engagements. Before founding his firm, Paul served as the president and CEO of Children's Mercy, where he led significant investments in people. Recognizing that great leaders aren't just hired, they're developed. In this conversation, Paul and I dive into what it means to prepare leaders for today and tomorrow, the lessons he's carried through his career, and how organizations can unlock the potential of both current and emerging leaders. So let's get into it.
Hello. I apologize for interrupting your listening experience, but this is worth it. Stay with me. On October 15, we are bringing Workplace Unfiltered, a Heliona experience that is the Heliona Life podcast. The top 5 guests, the most listened guests, will be in a roundtable discussion on October 15 in downtown Kansas City. Shout out to Chicago, Iowa, Illinois. Thank you guys for always tuning in. But I want you to picture this. One night with leaders from across the country, HR professionals, mental health providers, and you, the listener, all in the same room for unfiltered conversation about performance and mental health. It's live, it's going to be honest, and yes, you can be part of it. So make sure to RSVP today at heliona.io. That's HELIONA.io. Or you can visit the show notes right now and make sure to RSVP on the event page. We only have a block for 50 people, exclusive to my listeners and LinkedIn followers. We'd love for you guys to show up October 15, and I would love to meet everyone. There'll be food available, drinks, coffee, amazing time. Doors open at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. So again, visit heliona.io to learn more or visit the show notes. And cheers. Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for being on the Heliona Insight podcast today. And I appreciate you so much for just making time and being available to be on the podcast. And for those listening, I want to say that Paul will be available October 15 for the live podcast. Yes, this is an ad for myself. But again, make sure you register. A link will be in the comment. But Paul, I want to start the conversation here. I read this blog that you did, titled Leadership Evolution and the Value of the Executive Coaching. I want to get into that because one of the things that we talk about here on this podcast is, focus around like retention. And then also just the cost of not being able to retain your people. And I've talked to a lot of people on this podcast that have shared like coaching is a good factor to helping, especially your leadership team, deal with things that are happening within the workplace to be able to have access to coach. So I want to talk about this blog. If you can give us a synopsis of like, what is it about and why did you write it?
Yeah, that's great. Well, first, Abraham, thank you for the opportunity to be on the podcast.
course.
It's great to be with you, and I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate you asking about the article that I wrote, too, because I think, I recently retired after a 42-year career in healthcare leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you're going through that transition into the next chapter of your life and you're looking back on a career, you're kind of exploring what were the milestones of that career? What were the learnings of the career? What are you most proud of? What would you have done differently as you have gone through the journey? And I think one of the great learnings after 42 years in healthcare leadership is the power of feedback, introspection, and really understanding how you present yourself to your constituents. And in my case, it was the patients that we cared for, the families that we supported, and of course, the team members that we supported so they could activate the best potential of themselves. So when I think about what I'm passionate about and what the lessons I've learned in that career, it really was based upon the power of feedback and the ability for others to have the opportunity to reflect on how I'm presenting myself to them and to others that I'm responsible to care for and support. So that ultimately led to a realization that my coaching experiences, my experiences with executive coaches that were helping me, were some of the most powerful moments in my career. So that has really spawned this next chapter in my life to really do executive coaching as part of the next chapter and to help activate the full potential of other leaders.
Right. Yeah. And like, thanks for sharing that you actually had executive coaching while you were running such a big operation at Children's Mercy. I do want to know, like, how exactly do you see executive coaching playing out in a leadership team? Because, I've worked with a lot of companies, and normally when companies are selling solutions, they're selling it to the employees. Even I've fallen into this. I've sold solutions to employees, and now I'm like pivoting a little bit, and then going into the management role. Like, okay, these managers, these like leaders are also dealing with so much coming at them that we don't see on a daily basis. How can we create solutions to make sure that it can assist them, be there for them, counsel them as they navigate, just the murky waters of being a CEO, a C-suite, or, like a board member, et cetera. So I want to know, how do you see that play out in a leadership team? In your own experience, if you want to get into that, and also how do you see it play out just in general?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that leadership is very, very tough. Being a leader is a tough job. I had the privilege and the honor of leading a great children's health system at Children's Mercy, for almost 7 years. And while that was a blessing and an honor to be doing that, it's a tough job. You are always on. It's a 24/7 responsibility. You are always being watched. And yet your ability to activate the full mission of the organization is based upon the ability to recruit, retain, develop, and empower incredible team members, right? Including leaders that may work for you or may work for others in the organization. And ultimately, as leaders, we do what I have described and others that we have worked with in culture journeys have described. We cast a shadow. We cast a shadow to those that we support, and in turn, that shadow gets cast throughout the organization.
Right.
And the organization will emulate our behaviors individually and our behaviors as teams. So it is critically important that we focus on developing ourselves individually and developing ourselves as teams so that the equation is 1 and 1 equaling 3 instead of 2. When collectively we are acting in alignment, we are collaborative, we care about one another, and we are singing off the same sheet of music with clarity and transparency, we can do amazing things to help our team members activate our mission every single day. So it is critical. It is critical. It begins at the top, at the CEO level. Perhaps you can even say it begins at the board level, at the governance level. But if leaders are not nurturing and fostering positive cultures that will demonstrate purpose, demonstrate a vision, and demonstrate accountability to that mission and those strategies that are going to carry it out, we will not be successful as organizations.
Right.
And it does begin with leadership. So our ability to introspect, to reflect upon ourselves as individuals, to reflect upon our performance as a team, to give and receive feedback with one another, to have healthy debate. We don't always, I always said to our team members that I don't want you all to be bobbleheads and say that, well, if Paul said it, it must be.
Right.
Because I always had an opinion, I always had a perspective, but I was not always right. And collectively, when we embrace the input and the perspective of others, we can get to an even better conclusion than perhaps we thought of ourselves.
Right.
So that's the importance of it.
Yeah, I love that. That's very beautiful, by the way, the way you broke everything down. And now I want to know, as someone who made a lot of mistakes around feedback, I was not prone to feedback back when I was managing a team. That's also because I was very young. I mean, this may be an excuse, but I was leading a very big team at a very young age. And I did horrible because, I didn't allow feedback. I didn't appreciate it because I felt like I know what I was doing. I used to wear a fedora, okay? I know what I'm doing here. I still wear the fedora, but now I went to therapy, so I'm doing much better. But I want to know, like, you being at such a high level, like, what does the cost of not getting feedback or not accepting feedback looks like for a leader that's managing other leaders?
Well, the cost can be heavy. And by the way, Abraham, don't beat yourself up, because we all as leaders, any leader who does not acknowledge that their journey has been imperfect, they've made mistakes, and they've had to learn along the way, is not being honest, to be very. I look at my early days as a leader. I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
Because, there's only so much that a textbook and a classroom can teach you about leadership. Leadership, effective leadership, is formed through experiences, through making mistakes, taking risks, experimenting, learning from others, mentorship, and of course, coaching.
Right.
So, it is the journey. I refer to it, and I think I say this in the article, leadership is like a bad EKG sometimes. It has its ups and downs.
Right.
You're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So the importance of having feedback from others and embracing the perspective of others, and also using coaching to help evoke awareness on your part of what is helping to advance your leadership and be successful, and what is hindering your leadership and perhaps creating those blind spots, is just critically important. So it begins with an acknowledgement that we are not perfect, we don't know everything, we make mistakes, and we're going to continue to learn and to grow.
Right.
That vulnerability, I would sort of encapsulate that as, vulnerability. Vulnerability is an incredibly effective tool as a leader, especially when it's authentic, because when others see that you know that you are imperfect and you make mistakes, they're going to evaluate you as being real, honest, authentic, and transparent. And I think those are very, very important attributes.
Right.
And it is critical. I've been part of many teams in my 42-year career. I've been part of some incredibly high-performing teams where every day we came in and we had the patient at the epicenter of every decision that we would make.
Right.
And we knew that it was a team sport. Leaders are generally type A people. They want to be successful. They want to continue to grow and evolve and be promoted and evolve maybe to a CEO level. But fundamentally, the most effective leaders are those that care first about the constituents they're serving, in our case, the patients, and care about each other, and have the willingness to be able to make difficult decisions, even when they're not the most popular decisions as well. But that only comes by experience, making mistakes, learning from those, getting feedback from others, and realizing that the journey is foundationally imperfect, and it's constant learning.
No, yeah, about 2 years ago, I had a coach for the first time because I was making so many mistakes. I was like, this is not, I know my intentions are pure. What's happening here? And then while talking to him, and he was like, he's like, I'm overwhelmed listening to you. You've lived 7 lives. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? And he was like, the amount of things that you went through, the amount of failures that you've had, and you wake up every day and keep going. And he's like, I can't even imagine the cost
that's within you right now, and the fact that you keep going. And back then he didn't know my story, but he was like, why do you keep going? And then I was like, you know what, I wake up every day just thinking like, what I'm doing, I just want to make sure it benefits that one child. This is me as a kid, the things that I went through. So to me, that's what keeps me going.
Yeah.
But then I made a lot of mistakes because I was also bringing a lot of baggage into all of the experiences that I was having in the early ages. I didn't know how to differentiate my own story and then me as a leader. So again, a lot of insecurities were coming into the workplace. And I wanted to know, you as a leader, have you ever experienced anything like that where you were like leading, but then there's something that's also poking into that before you talk to a coach to realize, oh, maybe I should not hold on to this for so long?
Absolutely. First of all, everyone, we are all human beings first and leaders second. We all have baggage. We all have life experiences as well as work experiences. And the best example that I can think of is I had, the opportunity to lead Children's Mercy during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, yeah. Bless your heart.
And I'll never forget that because it was, first of all, an experience that none of us ever want to go through again without question. And yet out of tragedy and challenge comes opportunity and growth. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we learned as an organization is that we had the ability to make decisions that may have taken months or years and make them within hours, days, worst case weeks, because we had to. But we also realized that while we were trying to ensure that we were taking care of each other and taking care of the organization, where there was no playbook to do that we could pull off the shelf, we were also moms, dads, grandparents, friends, community stakeholders, children of parents. Yeah. And we had to ensure that we were well at home with all of the challenges of children being pulled out of schools, of perhaps loved ones, elderly loved ones, maybe not surviving the pandemic, the exacerbation of the mental health crisis that was occurring at the time. We were all experiencing those dynamics as human beings. Yeah. And at the same time, we had to lead an organization through an unprecedented experience. You can't separate the two. Now, I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing, and that is a survival technique for me. Right. But no one is ever perfect at separating the lived experience and the work experience. Ultimately, they do come together. I always laugh when I hear about work-life balance because there's no distinction between work and life, especially when you are a leader and in particular when you're a CEO. Right. So you can't just simply separate the two. You can use tools and techniques to allow you to focus on the issue at hand, but you're never going to be able to fully separate your personal life from your work life. Right.
Wow. Yeah. No, thank you for that, because I as a new parent and leading teams, I've kind of been struggling with that because I work every day. I am always with my computer. Even when I'm watching sometimes films with my kids, I'll have my computer and then I'm working. But then it got to a point that my kids, they're so adorable. They especially my 7-year-old. One time we were watching a movie and Mercy went and grabbed my computer and gave it to me. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but he accepted it. And they all just hang out with me. So it's like, I hear the work-life balance all the time and I never relate to it. And people are like, you just unplug. Yeah. I was like, I don't know how to do that as a leader.
Yeah, and I don't think you can completely as a leader. And it's such a great and important topic, I think. And you're much younger than I am. And the journey that you're going through, I went through. I have always, when I dive into something, a job or a task or something, I dive into it with the idea of ensuring that it is achieved and there is excellence and it's a positive outcome, right? It doesn't always happen that way. So when you're working in these positions, it's hard work, and these are not 9-to-5 jobs, correct? But I think one of the things that I did, and I did it back in 2003, I went through a program that was called at the time the Corporate Athlete. It was a program that was started by 2 former professional tennis players who began to work with elite professional athletes with the goal of taking them from high performing to championship level. And through science and evidence and research, they realized that certain physiological and biological and body chemistry issues contributed to performance.
Right.
But ultimately, there was a realization that exertion without recovery leads to failure, right? If you're a professional athlete and all you do is exert 100% of the time and you never take the time to recover, ultimately you're going to fail. Your muscles are going to fail. You're going to fatigue. So the same principles they learned apply to leadership. If you are constantly going and exerting and not taking time to recover, ultimately you will fail. So as part of that experience that I went through with the corporate athlete, we had to write a personal mission statement. I still carry that personal mission statement with me. It's right in this little portfolio right here. And what I realized when I went through the thought process of writing that is, when I die, when I'm 6 feet under, what do I want my gravestone to say? Do I want it to say, he was an incredible healthcare executive? No. I want my gravestone to say that he was a great husband, a great father, a great friend, a faithful servant, to the one above, a community servant, all of those things. And oh, by the way, he was pretty good at what he did for his job. That's at the bottom. Because when you look back on what legacy you want to leave, the legacies and the jobs that we are working with are fleeting. Very few people leave a legacy that in 100 years people will remember. At Children's Mercy, we have examples of that with Catherine and Alice Berry, the founding sisters of Children's Mercy. But in the grand scheme of things, what do you want to be known for? And that should be your guiding light. That should be your North Star. And for me, that's always been, it's not perfect. And sometimes I work too hard, and maybe at times I should have been working. But I always prided myself on always being there for the kids' baseball games, the girls' softball games, the basketball games, the events and everything. It was rare that I missed those. And and it was difficult at times, but I always thought it was important given how I wanted my legacy to be listed and prioritized on that gravestone.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. I feel like I'm getting all the cheat code of like how, what to do the next 10, 15 years. But thank you for that. I do want to, dive into the employee experience as a leader. Like, how do you see that play out, especially when it comes to psychological safety? And I know, you've lead teams, like massive teams during COVID. And during COVID, a lot of discussion around psychological safety was everywhere, but usually you hear it from the employee experience. So from a leadership perspective, especially you, I remember you guys were investing around $275 million into the pediatric mental health.
Yes.
But COVID was happening, all these things were happening. So I wanted to know, how did you saw psychological safety play out as a leader within the workplace?
Yeah, I think there were a few, what I would describe as cataclysmic moments in our journey at Children's Mercy that gave me what I described as a kick in the gut. So we're referring to the mental health crisis, which had existed and was growing rapidly before COVID ever hit. And then when COVID hit and we started pulling kids out of school and doing all those things, the mental health crisis began to be supersonic in its speed and just to continue to exacerbate. And we began to see an increase in something that for any CEO of an organization just keeps you up at night. And that is a dramatically increasing number of physical assaults to our workforce, to our team members, and an incredibly high level of what I would describe as verbal and emotional assault to our workforce. And in some cases, not physically necessarily, but emotionally with one another through bullying. We had surveys that indicated that we had a problem even within the workforce, not just between patients' families and our team members. So that was the wake-up call, that we had to ensure that we were doing everything we can to ensure that our team members were physically and emotionally safe. Some of those interventions were physical in nature. It was the way we designed our physical units, the way we provided security, support, and response, and different things like that. but it was also ensuring that the employees, the team members knew that we cared about them. So we had a center for professional well-being that existed when I arrived at Children's Mercy, but we decided to expand that not only to include well-being of our clinicians and especially our physicians, but the well-being of every team member. So we had a program that was expanded and led and supported all of our team members through things like little pulse surveys. We would go out on patient care units or in departments to do wellness check-ins to see how people were feeling.
Right.
We would bring things to the departments ranging from candy to stress balls and everything in between to show that we supported them. And we also ensured that they knew that it was unacceptable when a team member was physically or verbally assaulted. And that, I think was evidenced by the fact that we made all these interventions. And then, of course, that led to the program that Children's Mercy still calls Illuminate, which was a $275 million investment in addressing the mental health crisis. But it's not only about the kids. It's not only about the kids and the families. It's also critically important that we take care of one another in our organizations.
Right.
Because when somebody is not physically or emotionally well when they come to work every day, then they are not going to be able to give their best to the child that's in that bed or the child that's on the exam table or the coworker that they are working and collaborating with.
Wow.
So that's why it's so critically important.
Yeah, I mean, that's even heavier because I actually forgot that was happening during COVID. And as a leader and just the entire team, I know that's not part of their job description. Going into work and realizing that now you have to actually deal, not even deal, but you have to be responsible of other people's emotions.
Yeah.
When you have to be responsible of their health and well-being. And then as a CEO, like you have to take all that on, not only the mental, the physical, but the financial as well aspect of that.
It's so true. And as a CEO, you have the responsibility, the burden, and the honor of making sure that you are strong and steadfast, and that people can look to you with confidence, knowing that while we're going through these challenging times, things are going to be okay. So I always did my very best to be a transparent but optimistic leader. Leaders have to be optimistic. But then sometimes it takes a toll on you personally.
Right.
And the best example I can give is when the shooting occurred at the parade after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. That took an enormous toll on our organization and our people, because some of the victims of that event were treated and cared for at Children's Mercy. And I had lunch the day before with the brother of the woman who was killed in the parade shooting. And I did not realize it hit me. And I began to actually take advantage of, the support of our team members and our Center for Well-Being when I realized that this was hard for me. And there were times when I was presenting to large groups of team members that I started getting very emotional. I was breaking down myself. And that's when the leader of the center came to me and asked me if I was okay and, could she help? So, it's, and by the way, while we're experiencing events, as you know, right now over the last few days. So unfortunately, we are in a societal pattern where these events that ultimately take a toll on us physically and emotionally are becoming more frequent and more profound, and of course, more public through social media and television and so forth. So it's ever more important that we look inward to understand how we are responding, but as leaders, how our organization is responding. Right. And again, why is that important? Number one, we need to care for each other as people. Number two, we need to care for the people under our care. Right. And in our case at Children's Mercy, it was children and families that we are supporting.
Wow. No, yeah, thank you for that. Because I remember that very vividly, because I used to have a condo at the Pound Light Apartments. And I remember, thinking about going to the parade with my kids, but I'm just like, you know what? I'm not feeling too good. I'm just gonna stay, and then I stayed in, and all that happened. I'm just like, whoa. And then the same time, I was working with Children's Mercy at that time with I can't remember his name, but he always has really good hairstyle and really good jackets.
It must be Rob Steele.
Yeah,
Rob
Steele.
Dr.
Yeah,
Steele.
Yeah. I was working with him and the chief. I can't remember her name as well. I'm really bad with names, but chief marketing officer
Teresa Olson?
Yeah. I was working with them
Just
as well.
spoke with Teresa last night. As a
Really
matter of
awesome,
fact.
group of people, and then also I was connected to them by Vince I believe he's a treasurer on the board. Vince.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Vince
yeah.
Clark. He's
Vince
a
is
member of
kind
the
of
board.
like an untitled like mentor of mine.
Yes.
He's someone who I check in just every now and then. Hey, I'm building this. What do you think? And then he would give me feedback. Great guy.
Yeah, Vince is one of the smartest people I know, and he's been a longtime Children's Mercy board member, chairs the finance committee, a really, really smart guy.
Yeah, great guy. Yeah, so I lean onto him a lot, whether he likes it or not. I don't know whether he even, he's like, I met this kid and he hasn't stopped emailing me. But like good guy. I remember back then I was working with them, and then I was like, man, I wonder how they're doing down there, because that's a lot. You're seeing kids that are dealing with, the aftermath of COVID and all the things that are happening, and now this happened.
Yeah.
But like, what, I'm happy that you had support available for you within the workplace, which was, your wellness leader, like coming up and talking to you.
Yes.
I know a lot of companies, even the wellness leaders, don't have the luxury to do that. They probably would not go and talk to the leader, even if they notice something, because they don't want to offend them.
Yeah.
What did you do personally to make it safe for that individual to come and talk to you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Abraham, and I think it goes back to really my upbringing. I grew up in a very a middle class home. We never wanted for anything, but we didn't live a life of luxury. I grew up in a small home. My dad was a pharmacist, and he served in the Navy and became a pharmacist and pharmacy director, worked in the VA system his entire career. But my parents taught me a lot. We were not, it was an old school family. We didn't tell each other we loved each other all the time, but I knew I was loved. Right. And but my dad especially, and my mom taught me the importance of working hard, right, and never taking yourself too seriously. And realizing that you're just one of 300 or 400 billion people in the world, and you're nothing. You're special, but you're nothing special at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So as I worked my way I went through undergraduate school and graduate school and so forth. I had the blessing of working in jobs in the early part of my healthcare career, where I was side by side with what I call the people doing the real work. My first job was administering the emergency department at a hospital, an academic institution in Chicago, Rush University Medical Center. And, it was an inner city hospital, and I saw these patients that were coming in every day. And I remember, you remember these milestone events, and I used to oversee the unit clerks, as we called them, that worked in the ED. And my first year in the job, right around Christmas time, I was having a meeting with the unit clerks, and they asked me if on New Year's Eve they could go home a half hour earlier than their shift ended. And I said, how come? How come? And they said, well, at midnight, that's when the shooting begins. And this will allow us to get to our homes before the shots ring out.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my God. And as my first and best mentor in healthcare told me and taught me, first you have to think about who these unit clerks are as people and their lived experiences before you think about what they're doing in terms of their tasks on the job. So I learned, I think, a big dose of humility and vulnerability very early on in my career. And I always took pride. And to this day, I take pride in the fact that I walked the hallways of Children's Mercy, being my last job. And my best days were when I was walking those hallways, not in a meeting room, but in the hallways, saying hi to, the housekeepers and telling them that, thank you for doing a great job. This place not only looks great, but you're preventing infections from occurring by cleaning the operating room impeccably well. Right. You're creating a first impression for everybody that walks in this door. Sometimes it may have been just a greeting, a good morning in the hallway. Sometimes it may have been a hallway conversation. But for me, that was the joy that I took in my position. Right. So I think what I did was, created the reality and the perception of approachability. I would have people come to my office every day and people who wanted to meet with me. And sometimes they were the housekeepers and the people, working, doing the real work as I described. And I valued the opportunity to meet with them because I learned a lot about what was really going on in the organization. And it always gave me that little injection of humility that we all need as we evolve into these higher level leadership roles. So, the frustration that I would have at times was when people wouldn't tell me what was really going on. They might tell me the great things that were happening, but I would always say, tell me what I need to know, not what I want to know. And I think that helped to create a safe, space in general. But that was the joy when I could meet with the people who really were doing that work, that important work every single day. And I think that created, the feeling that he is an approachable leader. We can talk to him in the hallways. He knows names. Even though I wasn't always great with names, I knew faces. But I took pride in that. And candidly, it gave me great joy in my leadership career.
No, yeah, like work, not to even like say that it's their fault, but I've worked with a lot of leaders where they don't have that experience. They want their employees to give them feedback, but the employees are afraid to give them feedback. So it's like they're always just like putting out all these surveys, but they struggle to like get feedback. I actually work with a bunch of hospitals because I do all these mental health events. Yeah. And a few of them hired me, and then they'll send their employees to those events so they can get feedback. Because through my events, I'll have an entire, like a survey for when they come in and when they leave. Because I do like a pulse check. As like how's everyone doing, and then as they leave, like how do you feel now after this entire experience, and then I would share that with those companies because they struggle to get feedback from their people. And my only rule is like I'll give you the feedback. I will not tell you who wrote it. This is for you to get better, to make sure that you can create that psychological safety so that your employees can approach you. So thank you for like explaining just in your own realm how you go about that.
Well, if I could comment on that too, and I mentioned this in the article that I shared with you, but unfortunately, the investment and the prioritization of giving and receiving feedback is not where it needs to be. I would suggest not just in healthcare leadership, but in leadership in general. And it's so critically important. And at times when, in my case, when the healthcare system in general was going through challenges, sometimes when you had to begin to prioritize resources or your focus had to focus on cost reduction, things like coaching and mentorship and leadership development often would be the things that would suffer and be deprioritized. That's a mistake. That's a mistake because that ability for us as leaders to give and receive feedback, to be open, to be evoke awareness on our own parts about how we're leading effectively and what blind spots we have. It's so critical. It's not critical just in the current state as you're managing the issues of the day, but it's critical in terms of the future state, implementing the vision of the organization, and even most importantly, developing the next generation of leaders. Doing the succession planning that unfortunately some organizations don't do well. And in fact, we didn't do well at Children's Mercy until we began to make that investment. And one of the things I'm most proud of at Children's Mercy is implementing what we call the Berry Institute, which was our investment in developing leadership from within, but in a specific way, developing leaders who understood the importance of positive cultures and had the ability to nurture that culture. Because when you have a strong culture, those team members that are caring for kids and supporting that care are going to be given the best chance to activate the full potential of themselves every single day.
As you talked about just like developing, today, I think there's almost about 4 different generations in the workplace. And another feedback that I get on this podcast and as a company is, a lot of people leave jobs because they don't feel like, they have a future in there, or there's no path for them for growth. There's no, just any access to just personal development or like professional development for them. They're just there to work and go home. So they feel like they're stuck at the same position over and over again. On the other hand, a lot of younger generation, especially Gen Z and like the late like millennials that are going into the workplace, they're just being told, do this. and it's like, okay, well, I'm expecting training, but there's no training available. You just figure it out. I literally had a meeting with someone who wanted to grab coffee with me. She goes to UMKC. She's just been like messaging me earlier. I kind of ignored it because I'm like, I got so much to do. But then I actually like took it up, and then grabbed coffee with her. And then she was like, I just wanted to know if, with your solution, because, apparently she's been listening to what we're building. And she's like, do you guys have an opportunity for people to learn continually on your platform? I was like, oh, actually, I we don't, but I'm going to build that. So I wanted to get your take on that. As a leader, why is it important to make sure that, your employees, your leaders are always learning continually so that they can grow, and then also create a path for them to maybe apply for different roles within the company?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's an incredibly huge challenge in leadership in general in all organizations. And I'll go back to some of the work that we did at the Barry Institute. But, when I came to Children's Mercy and I began to put together my leadership team, I invested a lot of political capital by hiring a lot of leaders from the outside. Even though we had great leadership talent from within the organization, I had concluded that those folks had not yet been developed at a point where they could assume these executive roles. But as I hired a lot of people from the outside, I also made the commitment to myself and the organization that we were going to invest in developing people from within, not just existing leaders, but people who didn't even realize that they had leadership potential. And that was the catalyst for the creation of the Barry Institute. So we created that as an entity and a pathway for existing leaders and potential leaders to come in, to go through an assessment process so that we understood what their goals and aspirations were, and to help them in a very personalized way at times and in a broader sort of macro way at times to get plugged into programs and modules and pathways that can help develop them in accordance with what their goals were. Right. Now, this is not a perfect science or a perfect art, because we said right up front, we're not going to be able, everybody who wants to be a leader at Children's Mercy or be promoted at Children's Mercy, not everyone's going to have that opportunity. Yeah. And in fact, there may be situations where the next step up or the next step over for an individual might be in a different organization. Right. That's just the reality. That's just supply and demand at work. But the first step was sort of understanding the goals and the aspirations, or maybe pointing out an opportunity or a talent that somebody didn't even realize they had. So what we would do is begin to populate committees and task forces with people who didn't even have a leadership title, but they knew they were we knew they were thought leaders in the organization, and they could make contributions to, the work at hand. So we tried to do that, and then we developed programs internally. We took advantage of programs externally, like the Block School of Management as an example of that, and began to develop this curriculum that was individualized when it was appropriate and developed for larger populations and members of leadership. You're right. We are now basically, we have 4, maybe even 5 generations of workers in our organizations, all of whom have different needs, different priorities. And for me as an old baby boomer, understanding how the unique perspectives, differences, and priorities everybody brings to the table, it's challenging. And we can't always meet them, but we have to understand them and do our best to tailor our organization's resources around those. But first and foremost, there's some building blocks. And the building blocks are to ensure that every team member has the opportunity to understand the purpose and the reason for the existence of the organization, what we do, why we do it, it's our mission, what their role is in the organization, and to engage them as what I refer to as an improvement specialist. I was never successful in getting this on their ID badges, but I worked hard to refer to every team member in the organization, not just as a registered nurse or financial counselor or social worker, but as an improvement specialist, because they always knew what was broken and what needed improvement in our systems and processes more than I would ever know. Right. And that was sort of the evolution. That's been the evolution of lean leadership in healthcare and in other organizations. So when you do that, when you engage people, first of all, you give them a sense of purpose. They know that they're valued in the organization. And then second of all, their talents and their capabilities begin to emerge and they rise above the waterline. I'll tell you a little story if we have time here, but when COVID hit, there was a physician. Her name is Dr. Jennifer Watts. She's an emergency medicine physician by background and has since at Children's Mercy evolved into a variety of leadership roles. I didn't even know Dr. Watts before COVID hit. And then in a few short weeks, Dr. Watts was in my office several times a week, and we were on the calls with the governor's office and constituents and colleagues from around the healthcare community, working our way through the COVID pandemic. That's an example of a leader who, through experiences and circumstances, some planned, some unplanned, rose above the waterline, and we realized, wow, that's an incredibly talented individual that has the opportunity to evolve. So sometimes it's planned and systematic, and sometimes it happens via circumstances.
Wow. No, and you know, like even with Children's Mercy, you know, I for some reason I have my favorite employees there or favorite leaders due to their activities online. And there's this individual, I think her name is Christina Meyer.
Stephanie Meyer?
Stephanie Meyer.
Yeah.
I don't know why I say Christina.
That's
I just say
right.
Christina.
Yeah.
But Stephanie Meyer. You know, I see her posts online, and she's always talking about, you know, not only our experience, but the employee's experience, the patient's experience. And the way she writes is very like poetic. As a writer myself, I enjoy reading her posts. And I do now, I just said that I'm thinking of all the pushback that I get when it comes to the 4 or 5 different generations in the workplace. Usually the pushback that I get is like, how do you make sure that you are not letting go of your own mission and vision as a company just to meet those people where they're at? Because a lot of companies struggle with that. They're like, well, we don't want to just have a bunch of Gen Zs in our company dancing around. They're like, we want to make sure we maintain our company vision and mission and culture, and we don't want to change the culture. It's working. This new generation is coming in. How they don't know how to adapt to that generation, but they see it as like, we don't want to change our company culture. So there's always that friction, generational friction, you know, one might call it. And I want to know, like, in your case, how did you see that play out in Children's Mercy or any other, you know, like organization that you had the pleasure of working with?
Yeah, it's a tough challenge, and it is a two-way street. So on one hand, we definitely invested a lot in understanding the goals, the aspirations, the concerns, the dreams, the fears of our team members in the organization. We did that through surveys and investment in culture, which we can, you know, get into, because all these dots connect ultimately. It's a phrase I use a lot. So we definitely had to make that investment in understanding and doing our best to support their needs, with physical and emotional safety being at the forefront, right?
Right.
But then you also have to meet in the middle, because fundamentally we also developed a set of core values and guiding behaviors that we expected every team member to conform with, beginning with leadership. So those are sort of the foundational building blocks that are almost the non-negotiables along the way. So, you know, the challenge is to be able to articulate a vision, help people understand their role in moving toward that vision, and understand and to hold people accountable for a set of values and guiding behaviors that were sacrosanct, that represented the soul of the organization, while at the same time understanding those needs, goals, and aspirations that you have as an individual, and work hard to be able to create an environment and an organization where they knew they had a place. They had a place to continue to work, to grow, and to find opportunities to help them activate their full potential. It's never perfect. We succeeded in many ways and we failed in other ways. But that was our ultimate goal, to find that sweet spot. It's sort of the middle of the Venn diagram, if you will, right? And we worked hard to do that. But it's never a perfect art or a perfect science.
Right. Well, thank you for that, because that, you know, I hope my you know, past guests that I've had the pushback can hear that and like learn from that. You know, we are getting to the end of this, and I do have a question that I started asking, like pretty much every person that I talk to now, which I'm calling it the 3 Cs. And I want to take I want to hear your take about HC and just see what you think of them. So the first one is clarity, and the second one is communication, and the third one is capacity. And I want to hear, how do you see clarity play out in an organization? And then we can go to communication and capacity.
Boy, I should have hired you a long time ago, because you're really touching on a lot of very relevant points that as leaders we all have to focus on. Clarity is so critically important. And in an organization like Children's Mercy, which when I left was comprised of about 9,000 team members.
Wow, I didn't know that was that many.
Yeah, 9,000 team members distributed over 24, 25 sites, 2 hospitals. So you had physical challenges of creating clarity in the organization, and just the challenge of articulating to everyone why we exist, what we aspire to achieve, and how we're going to get there, and what your role is in that journey. So I always felt it was critically important that we communicated frequently, effectively, and clearly.
Right.
Now, I wasn't always successful in that. I think sometimes as leaders, we can drift into management speak, right? And I was guilty of that at times. And in healthcare in particular, we're very well known for our acronyms.
Yeah.
Everything we do has an ABC attached to it in some way, shape, or form. And we have to be mindful that not everybody understands what those ABCs are, right? So we have to be able to speak in a way that everyone can fundamentally understand. And it's sometimes that may be complex for certain audiences where the complexity is required, but through town hall meetings. So what we used to do, we started town hall meetings. I started small group meetings with random employees, no more than 15, who self-invited themselves to these meetings. And we had a way of prioritizing the invitations where we would just do a kind of a group rounding session. So people could hear what's going on in the organization, but ask any question of me, and we could talk about things in a small group, intimate way to help create that clarity. And then if those team members understand what's happening, why it's happening, and where we're going, they're going to tell their friends too. And their friends are going to take advantage of these. So through large town hall meetings that may have thousands of people participating, to small meetings that may have 15, to one-on-one meetings, that's how we attempted to both communicate and create clarity. One of the things that I was very proud of that was a learning during COVID. So when COVID hit, it hit children's hospitals very differently than adult hospitals. Adult hospitals were bursting at the seams with incredibly sick patients. In our case, COVID was not a disease of children. Therefore, we had to shut down essentially the hospital, shut down our clinics, and the hallways were at times like ghost towns. And we were social distancing, trying to ensure the safety of one another. So as a result, I wasn't able to be physically in front of people nearly to the extent that I was used to. So we started these virtual meetings where I would literally go in the auditorium and do a virtual meeting that people could call into on their computer. And, so that they would know from my perspective how we're experiencing the pandemic, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and so forth. That became so successful that we continued those virtual meetings. And so it's a variety of ways that we tried. Many were successful. Some we had to tweak. We got feedback from a lot of people on what we could do better. But that helped us to create both a communication methodology and also the clarity of the communication, and also how the organization is doing. Right? How are we doing in terms of quality and safety and the patient experience? How are we doing in terms of advancing our research vision? How are we doing financially and so forth? And we were struggling during COVID big time. So that clarity is critically important.
And you've touched on communication because I know both kind of play very closely together, because in order to be clear, you have to communicate. So what's your take on capacity? Because I know that's one of the biggest part when it comes to COVID and now.
Well, let me give you, if I could, one additional point on communication.
Of course.
Well, certainly the workforce looks to the CEO to be a, a very effective communicator. I can't communicate on my own. There has to be cascading of communication through our leadership and management teams. At times we struggled with that because we had to ensure that we were all sort of marching to the beat of the same drum. We were all on the same page in terms of where we're heading, why we made a certain decision, and so forth. And that was a challenge at times because when you grow into a management role, a frontline management role, a middle management role, you're not always taught how to be an effective communicator. So we had to work very hard to equip our management team with speaking points that they could use in their own personal and authentic way to communicate the direction of the organization and what's happening. Sometimes that was successful and sometimes it wasn't successful. That was a big challenge for us, but an area that we invested heavily in. So communication is not just at the individual level, but it has to be systemic and it has to include everyone that has a responsibility for communicating and engaging their team members in the direction of the hospital and the organization. And then you mentioned capacity. So I'm going to ask you to define capacity more clearly for me. But one of the things we learned at Children's Mercy and one of my learnings as a leader is I felt we had an opportunity to accomplish a lot. And I felt a sense of urgency in moving the ball down the pathway. Why did I feel that way? Part of it was my nature as a leader, but part of it was knowing that we are caring for children. And if there is one child that is not getting the best possible outcome in the safest environment with the best experience, then we have work to do.
Right.
And we can't sit around and just wait for those things. We have to move. So one of the things I was criticized for, and some of it was very legitimate, is we're doing too many things, too many initiatives, right? So one of the things you have to be mindful of in an organization is the capacity of the organization to do multiple things at the same time and complete them successfully.
Right.
That may be projects, tasks, long-term strategies, whatever it is. So we began in the final couple of years of my tenure before I retired to really focus on prioritization of initiatives, to ask ourselves, how are they aligned with the importance of our culture, our strategic plan, research, patient care, whatever it might be. And we tried to narrow down the physical number of things that we were working on to be mindful of the capacity of the organization physically and emotionally to take on the amount of work that we were doing. Because it's easy for me to say, we're going to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But then somebody has to actually carry out the work, right?
Yeah.
And that was one of the learnings for me as the CEO and for us as a leadership team to better understand and focus on how we prioritize our initiatives. And that was really being mindful of the capacity of the organization to not just do the work, but to do it successfully and ensure that our patients and families and our team members were benefiting from it.
Yeah. No, like thank you for being honest about that. Just stating that was something that you were like criticized for. And then, the capacity aspect, I just let the guests just take it as is and then share from their own experience. But normally, I think you were the first person that shared that perspective. Because I said, I was like, wait, that's new to me. Because usually when I ask it, a lot of people share capacity from the employee experience. It's usually the burnout. Like, I didn't know my team was burning out until I did this and this and that, and I realized, oh wow, I'm giving them way too much to do.
I think we're saying the same thing because the consequences of not being mindful of the capacity of the organization and its people is that you do have burnout. And it's not just burnout at the leadership and management level. Yeah. That burnout takes place all throughout the organization. And then, there is maybe not a defined, maybe not a tangible, but a very intangible level of chaos that can occur in the organization where people, they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing, right? Yeah. So that's when we really said, look, first and foremost, provide great care. Yeah. That's what's most important. Everything else will take care of itself. But the consequences of not being mindful of the capacity of the organization is you do have burnout, you have turnover, you lose good people, or at a basic level, you're simply not getting the best out of the amazing people. And we had 9,000 amazing people at Children's Mercy, the best out of people who every day want to come to work and just do the best job they can of caring for kids or supporting that care.
Yeah. My wife is going to kill me for saying this, but a long time ago, my ex used to work at Children's Mercy, and she was the one who actually connected me to Vince.
Yeah.
She loved her job. Like every morning she's just waking up and I'm just like, let me sleep. She's excited to go to work. And she used to work at labor and delivery. No relations, Shana, if you're listening, just a story. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. And even me, the reason why I wanted to have you in my podcast is because my son, I take him to Children's Mercy and his name is Mercy. He thinks the hospital is his. He genuinely believes that's his hospital because his name is Mercy, Children's Mercy.
Well, it is his hospital. It is his hospital.
I know, it's so
that's
funny.
That's why we exist.
No, absolutely. And I remember when we met you for the first time, I didn't even know who you were. I didn't even know you were a CEO, but he just asked you some question and you got to his level and you were talking to him. I was like, oh yeah, this guy is really cool. Because I work with a lot of therapists and I know that's their method to show that you are present with a child. Yeah. And I remember I was talking to the nurse and she was like, oh yeah, that's the CEO. I was like, what? That guy? I'm like, I could have introduced myself. But yeah, I was running late, so I was like, all right, buddy, let's go. Just let the nice man go. So thank you for that. Thank you for being present with him at that moment.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning that. But as I said earlier in our discussion here, those were my best days. When I had the opportunity to walk the hallways and meet folks like yourself and your child and just engage with you. I mean, that was my purpose, right? That was constantly that was my reminder. And I, the other lesson I learned and I tell people is that for me, when I thought I was having a bad day, I would just go and walk the hallways and then I would see the kids, the families and the struggles. No one wanted to be in that hospital, right? Yeah. And immediately the bubble burst pretty quickly. And I realized my bad day was nowhere near the day that those kids and families are having. So.
Oh yeah, that's a great perspective. Like, wow. But yeah, I mean, I could talk to you all day, but I'm going to have to bring you in season 2. We have a closing tradition here that I like to ask every guest. So based on everything that we've talked about today, from the moment you walk into the building to now, I want to know genuinely, how is your spirit right now?
My spirit is really at a high level. Now, we were talking before we sort of went on the air. We're both,
I know, right?
My allergies have kicked in, and I didn't sleep well last night, and all that. So I may not be at my physical best, but this conversation has been energizing for me because, first of all, anytime you have an opportunity to reflect upon 42 years in a field that is ultimately geared toward improving the health and well-being of individuals and communities, that's a great opportunity to reflect. And then at the same time, I as I pay forward the lessons I've learned over those 42 years in my new career, with Kempinski Consulting, that is an opportunity to just reinforce and remind myself of those lessons that I am paying forward to others, and hopefully impacting in a positive way the next generation of leadership, so that they can in turn care for folks like me who are going to need that care and do it in the best way they possibly can. So I feel great, and I thank you for facilitating a wonderful conversation.
Well, I'm honored. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time, so I'm glad that it happened. And again, thank you so much for coming in and just being honest with me and being vulnerable and transparent. It takes a lot for like leaders to get to this position. So I know from the bottom of my heart, a lot of the people that listen to this will find value in that. Normally, I'll get someone text me after they listen and they have so much to say. So that will be a lot of value in just listening to this conversation. But again, thank you so much for being here today.
It's been my pleasure, Abraham. Thank you for having me.